Executive Director of Friends of Intelligent Democracy, the first college PAC run by college students. And today I'm joined by retired Navy Commander Phil Ayer, who's running in Florida's 1st District. And Phil Ayer is a husband, father, community volunteer, and U.S. Navy veteran who rose from seaman to commander in a 26-year active duty career. Phil flew reconnaissance missions in the Cold War, Operation Desert Storm, and post 9/11 operations. He provided strategic advice to senior leaders in Washington, London, and NATO. And then after his career in the Navy, Phil returned to Pensacola to defend our country and the Constitution, to uphold American ideals, and advance the quality of life for everyone in Northwest Florida. I'm so happy to have you on today, Commander Ayer, and I'm going to turn the floor to you for the first few minutes.
Well, I am so honored to be here, and it's great to be invited to come to Friends of Intelligent Democracy. And, I am just delighted that you have asked me to be here. So thank you for that little introduction. And I guess, we are going to talk about policies. We're going to talk about healthcare. We're going to talk about college. We're going to talk about lots of things. But I think I want to give you a sense of what kind of congressman I will be. And to do that, I need to take you back to a day in 1989, at the height of the Cold War and my service in the Navy. Imagine, we were a naval aircrew, all of us, flying alone, far from home over icy seas, unarmed and unafraid into the teeth of the Soviet war machine. A pair of Soviet armed fighters intercepted, flashed their missiles, and ordered us to depart. But we stayed the course. Those hostile fighters maneuvered aggressively, blasted their exhaust into our engines, risking collision, tossing us around the fuselage, and compromising our ability to maintain course and altitude. The danger was real, yet we stayed the course to capture signals that revealed what the Russians tried to hide. And that was just one in a long series of classified reconnaissance missions flown day after day and year upon year for decades to keep the Cold War from turning hot. I learned a great deal from my naval service. First, vision is mission critical. We simply can't fight an enemy we can't see, whether that enemy is North Korea's nuclear threat, COVID-19, or global warming. Signals we reported up the chain of command saved lives and made America stronger. We need leaders in Washington with their eyes open, prepared to act. Second, risk factors in everything worthwhile. Those who live financially privileged and risk-free lives find it difficult to understand the integrity and sacrifice required for a life of public service. We need leaders in Washington we trust to stand for what's right, even when it's not popular. And third, there's no substitute for people. Our military isn't superior because of our weapons or technology. We have the mightiest fighting force in the world because of the smart, ethical, and brave men and women who are out there every day keeping us safe. And let's face it, these are tough times. More than 159,000 American lives lost to COVID-19. It didn't have to be. Tens of millions unemployed. Small businesses shattered. And when the government quit the fight, they betrayed doctors, nurses, and first responders, and they abandoned children, essential workers, and the rest of us. So now they cower behind distractions, distortion, and lies to amplify the divisions that are among us. No wonder people took to the streets demanding truth and justice from a failing government. Now is the time we need competent leadership the most. And this election gives us all an opportunity to begin America's revival. We can elect people based on their record of service and leadership. We can elect leaders who have a vision beyond their personal ambition and headline news. We are on the threshold of a new day where truth, honesty, morality, and a commitment to American ideals matter. Yes, the soul of our nation is at stake in this election. So I'm asking you today to trust me to represent you and to move Northwest Florida and our country forward with honor. And I'm blessed to have a great campaign coming because of audiences like you who listen, and people like me, and there are many of us who are also listening to what the people need, what our friends need, what our family need, and what people need across the political divide and the racial divides and the economic divides, what we all need to do to come together and move forward together and with honor. So with that, let's get on with the rest of the show.
Great. Yeah. And I, again, want to thank you for your military service. You know, my family has a lot of veterans. I had a grandpa and a great grandfather who both were World War II veterans. And my other grandpa was actually also a Navy man for 40 years and was a lieutenant commander when he retired. And on that note, you're running to represent one of the largest military communities of any congressional district in the nation. And so I want to kind of go back into your background experience and how that makes you best fit to serve this community, not only in Washington, but, you know, there's always the phrase, you know, all politics is local. So how could you serve your community on the local level as well?
Well, first of all, there's a matter of credibility, and every election is about a contrast. Matt Gaetz has not served. I happen to have served a short 26 years as both enlisted member and officer member, and I have a family. That kind of profile is not unique, and it is not required to represent, but it is an experience, a set of experiences that set me apart from Matt Gaetz and make it so that I know how to protect our bases and the economy that goes around with our bases. I know what it's like to have my children go into schools and expect that there will be safety. And I know what it's like to work and to work hard. So I'm really looking forward to championing working families, working people, and small businesses, because that's what the first district is all about, in addition to the military. And I'm just well suited for the task.
Awesome. And, you know, I think especially too is that, you know, with, you know, I think the first district also, you know, has an issue where Matt Gaetz does not match the people that he represents, whether it's the interest that he expressed in his voting record or also his background as well. And something, you know, hurting the nation, everyone across the nation right now is the COVID-19 pandemic. And, you know, unfortunately, we've seen the politicization of public health. And especially, you know, when we see great, you know, what I think will be remembered as American heroes like Dr. Fauci and Dr. Deborah Birx as well. So my next question turns to public health. And do you think that wearing a mask has become a political statement? And then what are the general dangers of politicizing public health, especially in the state of Florida, which has now, as of today, risen to over 500,000 COVID-19 cases since the beginning of the year?
I think it's less of a political statement, more of a safety statement, and respect for your fellow human beings. I do get out, and I do have people who come around to where I happen to be, and there are some people who wear masks and some people who don't, but more and more do, because more and more people in Florida are recognized, regardless of, you know, their political affiliation, are recognizing that they don't know if they have the disease. The disease is real, and it's causing all kinds of pain and death and suffering. So it's a matter of just basic safety and common courtesy. I had two sets of people, young guys, one football team. They were asking for a donation, you know, for some coupons to a fast food joint, and they said, "Hey, would you help us, you know, get ready for our football season?" So I got the opportunity to ask, "Well, do you think this virus is a hoax?" And one of the three boys there said, "Yes, I think it's a hoax." So I had this learning moment to do my best to support the others in their not so sure it's a hoax, and then turn around to think, yeah, you know, you all need to really take safety seriously, and good luck with your football season, but have safety first at all times. So getting back to the core of your question, looking for maybe observations, we saw Governor DeSantis accept political guidance from the White House, meaning President Trump, in his initial decision to keep the spring break open on the beaches. And even though the White House and the governor's mansion would have much more information than the various counties, the governor decided not to separate people for their own good, not to separate people from the virus spreading. So he just recklessly let it go, and that is one small episode in what we're dealing with now, because people were just not the virus isn't going to care, obviously, what age you are. There's maybe some difference in how your immune system is able to combat it, but not in how you're able to transmit or spread the disease, at least according to as much as we know now. And so I saw that the governor is taking a lot of political advice instead of scientific advice, And I saw a mix in our district, Northwest Florida, northwest corner of Florida, all the way up, by Alabama on the west and Alabama on the north, and the Gulf of Mexico on the south. Well, we had a mix of opinions from the local elected leaders. Most of them followed the political guidance because we were essentially a one-party region. But some, even in the opposite party, were very skeptical, and now we have at least Pensacola acting more responsibly than other towns around here. And I'm grateful for that because the data won't lie. The virus is calling Donald Trump's bluff and Ron DeSantis' bluff, and we got to look very closely at these decisions. Schools opening up is the next big policy reality that's going to hit everybody, and we just have to take it one step at a time, looking very closely at safety and learning together, just as safety and business, they go hand in hand there. It's not really either or.
Exactly. I'm from Ohio, and today we found out that our governor and his wife have both tested positive for COVID-19. And I think it also just shows that our government officials aren't immune from this virus as well. And I think I saw a very astute post that was talking about the reason Governor DeWine found out that he was positive was because he was meeting with the president. But, we see a lack of a national testing plan, even some states, a state level testing plan. And so it shouldn't take a meeting with the president to get a test. And before I move on to the next question, I just want to let the audience know that there will be an audience Q&A section on the latter half of the program. So, and any way that you're watching now, please feel free to submit a question. Our staff right now is collecting all of them so that we can also include some audience input. My next question is, Gen Z and younger millennials, like me and my team, have been leading the fight for climate justice and have been and against a climate crisis that we were born into. And, I think that's also, Florida is one of the states that the climate crisis will be affecting more than states like mine, where I live in Ohio. So how do you plan on supporting their message and actions in the climate justice movement as a whole?
Well, we're the Sunshine State. We need to invest in infrastructure that is forward-leaning in the energy production area, meaning renewable energies, less carbon. I want to make sure that the United States rejoins the Paris Climate Agreement or some other way reasserts its leadership in cooperation with, not in punching contention with other nations as we look to reduce the global warming that's caused by greenhouse gases and carbon being a very big part of that. So it's the infrastructure bill that Congress can do in focusing that on mitigation for rising sea levels and rising temperatures in the Gulf of Mexico. It's energy, green energy friendly policies, as simple as tax incentives for solar panels, solar cars, and it's a whole raft of other things. And one contrast that is stark with my opponent, Matt Gaetz, his first bill in Congress was to abolish the Environmental Protection Agency. And that just goes to show that he is, that he allows ideology, bureaucratic kind of ideology, to trump, pardon the expression, trump reality and to trump practical solutions. We've talked about my Navy roots. Part of the way you succeed in a profession such as the United States military is to focus on what? On practical solutions. You take away a lot of the politics, and you're able to come down and work for real solutions. So there is a contrast between Matt Gaetz and I. I want layered defense, and the federal government has a role in environmental protection, as does the state of Florida. Matt would like to take the federal government away from it. That's just absolutely wrong. So to summarize, join the climate Paris Climate Agreement. Make sure we have good layered defense with the federal government being part of that. Have plans to reduce carbon emissions and other greenhouse gases to near zero or zero by 2050. That's 30 years away from now. To have that as a goal and work toward it. And as far as young people like me and like you, we want to make sure that we are having customary use and public access to our beaches in Florida, so you can come down to Northwest Florida and have a good, safe, fun time and in an environmentally friendly way.
No, I agree, and I think if anyone watching takes away anything, I think that we can summarize Matt Gaetz in his time as Congress as a lack of common sense on a lot of issues. Protecting the environment and the water we drink and the air we breathe is something that I think anyone across the political spectrum can agree with. My next question deals with another issue that is always present in every election, and especially became a button issue with the Donald Trump campaign in 2016, is immigrants are an integral part of this country and deserve the same protections and rights that all Americans deserve. What will you do to make sure that our most vulnerable populations are protected from harmful legislation and what we've now seen as predatory policing?
Well, respect people for being human, for one. Don't lock people up in cages, as Donald Trump has done. Don't focus on a wall that would be a monument to fear. So I'm against the wall. I'm for border security. And when I was in the Navy, I had the opportunity to consult with a military task force that was helping with border security on southwest border. That's not the only border we have. We got a lot of issues with our airplane airports of entry and water ports of entry. So yeah, I'm for secure borders, but I'm also for a nation that welcomes immigrants, that has a rational immigration policy. We don't have rational immigration policy now. It's out of date. And whose fault is that? Well, it's all our faults. As it turns out, Congress should have fixed it years ago. Congress has not, and I want to be one of those people that comes in and works hard for comprehensive immigration reform for the well-being of people, and to have humane, good policies where if there's claims for asylum, get the appropriate legal resources at the borders to adjudicate it fairly. I want to make sure that we have that we don't have the culture around xenophobia, that we are very welcoming, that we're not setting up a culture that is us versus them, and that we get on with it, that we have a guest worker program that meets the needs of agriculture and service industries and anybody else, high tech, that needs these workers. Our well-being economically is tied to people in the country and outside the country helping us. So we have to have a good, positive attitude toward immigrants, and that is not, despite the quote law and order, come in legally mantra, that's not what is communicated, and that's got to change. We've got to get back to the Statue of Liberty's ideal.
I agree as well. And I think too that, people always talk about, especially Republicans love to talk about legal immigration, but then don't talk about how complicated and expensive a process that can be. I remember when I was a congressional intern, one of the things I worked on was immigration for the casework for that office. And the wait list at that time to be an immigrant from Mexico, for example, was 25 years. And I think that, people talk about, well, why don't they come in legally? Why don't they come in legally? And it's like, because they're trying to come in through a system that was built by people who wanted to keep them out. And you drive people into these situations where, a lot of the families that we see coming across the border, what they have in mind is their children and the safety of their children. And I think that's something that can relate to young people like myself, but then also to parents, right? And that they wouldn't want their families in the same position.
Yeah, and you raised the issue, or you haven't raised it, but you point to the issue of DACA, the deferred action for children. I forget what it breaks out to, but the DACA, the children who have been brought here by their families and who have grown up within the United States culture, and now the Trump administration wanted to send them back. The courts told them no. So DACA was a commitment that was necessary because Congress failed to do its job in comprehensive immigration reform. So President Obama, laid out a humane way forward for those people who were vulnerable on the margins of society. And I'm very proud that we had the DACA program. I'm very proud that the courts are upholding it, and we're able to keep people here because it's the right thing to do on a humanitarian level and in a policy level. So yeah, I'm with you.
Exactly. And before we move on to the next question, I do want to make a quick plug. At the bottom of everyone's screen is an Act Blue link. Donating through this event, we make sure that all our events are free, and donating makes sure that we can support candidates like Phil and also support our voter registration program. The next question I want to move on to discusses the policies toward minority communities in this country that have been highlighted through Supreme Court cases and other protest movements this year. And so what will you do to protect the rights of Black, Indigenous, and people of color in America, as well as people with disabilities and members of the LGBTQIA+ community in Florida and across the country?
Well, I will celebrate and commemorate days like today, which is an anniversary of the Civil Rights Act. I would want to make sure that we have secure elections, and with the security being in the integrity of them. You know, everybody should be able to vote and vote easily and securely, and we can achieve that with reforms that don't allow for lines all around blocks, as we've seen in Georgia, or other ways that prevent people from actually getting out and vote. More people voting is my philosophy behind any voting rights reform, and we've just got to have that. More people who are eligible to vote. Everybody should be voting. I'd like to make sure that there's a national holiday for that, for a national voting day, to encourage that. I don't want to mandate voting, but we need a holiday. Civil rights. So I've been very pleased to be and honored to be endorsed by the Florida LGBTQ Democratic Caucus, and in there we are committed. I'm committed to making sure that there are local ordinances that allow for or that protect people, anybody, from discrimination in employment situations and in anything to do with the market and in employment and housing. In some parts of Florida, you are protected. In our part of Florida, frankly, you're not protected. So there's a groundswell of people here who are working to educate and to tell people that, hey, you know, LGBTQ community is subject to losing their jobs, not getting housing because of their status in that way, and that is absolutely wrong. I'm very pleased to have met someone who marched across the Edmund Pettus Bridge with John Lewis back in the day, and his name is Reverend H.K. Matthews. He's a local civil rights icon, and he and I have known each other for a number of years, and I get to call him my friend now, and it's great. And I get to hear the suffering that he and the Dr. Martin Luther King generation did for African-American people to get the right to vote. That seems very ancient to us now, but that's the right on paper, and now we need to make it real. I'm also very pleased to have been endorsed by the main organizer of Black Lives Matter protests here in Pensacola. So I got the old and the young, but this guy who runs it, his name's Kyle Cole. He and his organization have done an incredible job of standing up for and pointing out systemic problems in our institutions, in our policing. And the city of Pensacola has taken him and other leaders within the Black Lives Matter movement and brought them into an advisory council for reforming the city police. They are moving out, and it looks like it's Pensacola coming together to look at this issue. Now, the rubber's going to meet the road when the policies are actually discussed and biases are alleged and then talked about. But I'm very hopeful for what the city government and the city police are doing, and it's a beacon of responsibility for the rest of the Northwest Florida, who has maybe a little bit more enlightenment to do. So what I want to do is be one of those congressmen who comes down and comes up to the people here in Northwest Florida from Washington, get down here, unlike what Matt Gaetz does, and talk about civil rights in places and not shy away from police bad behavior and from police good behavior. There are so many good law enforcement officers here who are protecting us, who are serving us, without their weapons and their guns. A lot of that's not needed at all, and acting as a deterrent to crime. And we very much appreciate that and honor their service. And I think, at least right here in Pensacola, we have problems. We have a segregated society here in Pensacola in a lot of ways, but we're working at it together. And one of the reasons here's a plug for military service. There's a lot of military in this district. They have more military than any congressional district in the nation, especially here in Pensacola. We've got the cradle of naval aviation, a long history of aviation and other Navy, mostly Navy, but other services as well. When I go to town halls and other events, I see often more leadership in the crowd than I do at the dais or at the front. The leaders are often defensive on something that happens, but it's the positive suggestions and positive examples that are shown by the people who come to protests and by the people who come to city council meetings and county commission meetings that are oftentimes leading the way. So I'm very proud to be here, and it's a great place to be.
Awesome. For this next question, I'm actually going to bring in our political director, Alex, for the next question.
Hello, Commander. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Hey, Alex.
I want to now ask you about an area of your expertise, foreign policy.
Okay.
So as the 21st century has progressed, the international landscape has changed rapidly. What do you believe is the biggest threat to national security today, and how do you plan on addressing this issue in a sensible manner?
Okay, so there are the biggest threat, I suppose, is the onward march of chaos. The biggest threat is what Steve Bannon has articulated. We'll get maybe a little academic here, as the disassembling of the administrative state, and what that has Donald Trump has embraced that. Matt Gaetz has embraced that. They've embraced slogans without thinking about real solutions. Matt Gaetz is one of those that says America first, and what he's failing to see is that's resulting in America alone. It's resulting in not having any visibility on the North Korean nuclear threat, and it's having it results in ignorance and an observation that President Trump did just the other day when there's this big explosion in Beirut, Lebanon, and the first thing he said, attack. It's an attack. Well, don't think so. Just calm down and take a look in a minute, and you'll see that it's most likely an industrial accident. Okay, we don't know all the facts yet, but it sure looks like that to me. And if it was an attack, well, we'd be on, and the region would be on, other powers would be on a completely different footing, and we're not. So it's chaos that is the most biggest. It's the biggest threat. There are lots of big threats around there that you can't go without mentioning. Climate change is a national security threat. Crime, financial crime that undermines the trust we have in our monetary system is a national security threat. The rise of China, in not just the rise of China for being China. China is actually, the Communist Party of China is repressive. Hong Kong should not have been should not be under siege, basically, as it is now. And I talk that down to the president of China, or Mr. Xi, just bowling right over the Western influence, because they see chaos. That our house is not in order in the United States, and so they see an opening and they're taking it in Hong Kong. And those kinds of things ratchet up chaos, and it's more of a dangerous world. And then there's the nuclear threat. Oh my goodness, let's remember nuclear weapons. And what has happened with those lately? Well, not much, except maybe we don't know about what's happening in North Korea. That's a real big concern. Not much, but maybe we don't know what's happening in Russia or with weapons. We've had the series of treaties, particularly Open Skies, that have eroded those things that have been put in place to keep stability and keep us working, without threatening each other with nuclear weapons. So those are big concerns. Those are just huge concerns. Overarching almost all of that is cyber and information warfare. we have an attack on our sovereignty with those with the interference in the 2016 elections, and it's part of what happened. It is part of what's happening in our psyche to discard what's real and what's true by being flooded with all kinds of conspiracy theories and all kinds of maybe facts, and we don't know what's true. Well, we got to get down to what is truth and what is factual, so we can have good discussions to go forward together as a country, not to go forward with division, which is amplified by lies from propaganda from President Putin's organization. He is essentially a criminal network in being, and one that President Trump is cozying up to, and it's deeply, deeply concerning.
Yeah, it really strikes me. You talk about how now with the failures of the Republican leadership, the go at it alone mentality really contrasts with the work you did in the Navy, working with coalition forces and working closely with allies to achieve results, right?
Right. Alliances are necessary in the world. We are not the world's policemen. We don't want to be the world's policemen, and we're not. But what we do have are alliances of common interest, whether it be combating terrorism and demonstrating stability and security. And you can't get to stability and security without a commitment to democratic ideals. So I know everybody's not all countries are on the same view of what democratic values and ideals are, but there are some commonalities, and one of them is be honest in your financial transactions and in what you say and what you do. And a lot of the countries out there are not honest in what they say and what they do and how they move around their influence and money. Chief among those are the despots of the world. Putin's Russia and Xi's China, North Korea, and some of our others are more concerning in their drift toward autocracy and drift toward oligarchy, and that's just wrong. And I see that happening in our country. We've got to stop it. And it's up to my generation and your generation partnering together to make it happen.
Great. All right, great. Alex will be back a little bit later, but we have one time for one more team-written question before we move on to audience questions, and that is, the COVID-19 pandemic, I think, is, blatantly aware to everyone, has brought upon a great deal of stress, uncertainty, disarray to the lives of countless Americans. And so I want to know, moving forward, again, as you talk about moving for the honor, how does Congress help Americans right now?
I didn't hear the question. How does what help?
How does Congress help the Americans struggling, whether it's financially or it's in terms of public health, just trying to get by day to day? How does Congress really help them, or what do you think they should be doing?
Well, okay, so I'm hearing your question as what are they doing and what should they be doing? And what they should be doing in the main is what the House of Representatives has proposed to the Senate, and where the Senate is not even going through the due process of democracy and taking up bills that the House has provided to help people with reality here in their kitchen tables. We need to make sure for now to keep the Paycheck Protection Program going through the pandemic, and not to put up with the philosophy that we see the Republican leaders doing, the leaders in the Senate who need to be voted out, who seem to have a philosophy saying we give to big companies and big corporations because they are going to make sure that everybody takes care, or is taken care of. Well, guess what? We don't have a tax base, or we don't have a democracy base that is resting on corporations. No, it rests on people. We, the people, give our permission to be governed by our consent, and our consent are people's consent. So when we're in trouble, like we are now with the COVID hurricane of this virus, we need to use the power, the economic power of the federal government and the other governments we have, the state and local level, to make sure people are taken care of. We are on the we're toying, or the Republican leadership is toying with depression type of economic policy, and so what should Congress be doing? Spending for a rainy day. We're in a rainy day, and we need to keep spending to be able to keep people through the rainy day, and then get back to what we came out of from the 2008 crash, when President Obama and the Congress, and by the way, the outgoing President George W. Bush, got together and made policy and ordered made some hard decisions that resulted in what? A steady growing economy that has been going on since the recovery from 2008 and until COVID. So that's what Congress should be doing, and not be distracted by the divisive politics that's coming out of the White House, egged on and promoted and accelerated by Matt Gaetz.
Exactly. We saw, Matt Gaetz wearing that giant gas mask on the House floor. I think, also just like the general disrespect towards public health officials as well. So while my team puts together the audience questions, I just wanted to take a moment to tell the audience we have over 200 people watching, and tell them a little bit about what Friends of Intelligent Democracy does. And so, like I said, we're the first hybrid PAC run by college students. I started this organization actually after almost getting kicked out of a political fundraiser because the organizers didn't believe that young people should be don't get involved in that part of politics. And it's true that young people like me are not out there writing $5,000 checks to anyone. And but that doesn't mean that we don't get a seat at the table, right? And going into the 2020 election cycle, young people like me and up into age 35 now make up the majority. And so, and while different generations may have different values, Commander Ayer, as you've said, that doesn't mean they can't come together. And part of that, like I said, is making sure we have a seat at the table. So we split our time by supporting great candidates like you, and then also registering college-age people to vote. In the 2018 election cycle, we helped 4,000 18 through 24-year-olds access the ballot box for the first time across this country. And I think that's ever more important when we see college students scattered across the country, whether they're staying at home or staying somewhere else if their college closed. We no longer have that infrastructure that used to be there to help register college students. I'm a junior at GW, and we have a program called GW Votes, where GW makes sure that all of our absentee ballots and voter registration forms get in, and that infrastructure isn't there anymore. And there's a lot of good groups like Vote.org and TurboVote that if people watching aren't registered to vote, please go there and register to vote. If anything, that as well, take that away from today. So yeah, that's what Friends of Intelligent Democracy is. And as I said, there's the Act Blue link at the bottom of your screen, or you can go to our website, which is intellidem.org, and read about us, and also go to our Act Blue page so we can support amazing candidates like you. Our first audience question is actually going to come from our social media manager, Jackson. So I will let him in and take it from there.
Hi, Commander Ayer. It's great to be speaking with you tonight.
Thank you.
The audience question for you that I have is that over the years, the rising cost of college debt has led to insurmountable amounts of it for college graduates. How would you, in Congress, help to alleviate this gigantic burden?
Well, first of all, I guess the low-hanging fruit policy answer on that is you ought to be able to refinance your debt as you need to be able to refinance debt when interest rates go down. And I just don't understand why that is not happening. So that needs to happen. It must happen. We need to reduce the cost for students to go into college. I'm very intrigued by the proposals to make 2 years of college in state colleges or junior colleges free or near free, but we must arrange it so that you're going through higher education without crippling debt. The bottom line, debt that hangs over people for years and decades is just not just. It is not a good partnership of people and their future. It's just on all cases wrong. And so I want to make sure we've got debt-free college and debt-free trade schools as well. And I want to make sure that we are looking at the other end of education. You're talking about the higher education. I want to make sure we're looking at pre-K education and what's provided by government through K through 12 as well. Good quality public schools in that K through 12 base will help people get good jobs and go into trade schools or classic four-year colleges with all kinds of different options there in a better and stronger footing.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Our next audience question will be read by our political director, Alex.
Hi, Commander Ayer. So the next audience question is, do you agree with Senator Cory Booker that America needs new voting rights legislation?
Yes, absolutely. So Senator Booker has, he is part of the group of senators and Democratic House members who recognize that and recognize that it must be much easier to vote than harder to vote. Automatic registration is something that we should be doing as Americans. We should have a national holiday for our national election. We should have, in this state, in our present circumstance with the virus, we should have secure mail-in voting. And I guess President Trump likes it in Florida, but doesn't like it in other places. Well, that's a bunch of hogwash, So we got to have rational going forward with that. So yeah, there are lots of reforms. Some of the keys, which I'm not talking about now because I forget, frankly. But I trust Senator Booker because in the area of election reform, because he's right, and we've got scare tactics that suppress the vote in some populations that should never happen. Right now, here in Florida, we've got more Democrats who are waking up. People, or I should say, not Democrats. How about let's change the framing of that. We have more voters who happen to be registered with the Democratic Party that are waking up to their ability to influence policy in their lives by voting for this person or the next person. They voted for Ron DeSantis just now as governor, and a lot of people across the spectrum are unhappy with his performance with this virus, and now they have an opportunity to elect people based on their record of leadership and service, and that's why I'm asking people to consider me as someone with a record of leadership and service over Matt Gaetz. So we're not telling people to go home and not vote. We are helping people, making it easier to vote by mail. Big push here by the Democratic Party in Florida to have more people register to vote or request to vote by mail, and that's what's happening. It's very positive. So I'm very hopeful and cautiously optimistic, and going full steam ahead on our campaign as part of the many campaigns here in Florida to turn this ship around.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely that much more crucial during the pandemic to allow people to safely vote by mail so that they don't have to needlessly expose themselves to the virus while they exercise their constitutional right.
All right, great. Thanks, Alex. Our next question turns to something that is both COVID related, but also has been a long existing problem in America. High prescription drug prices have proven to be a burden for many American families. And, right now there's one drug in America that costs $2 million for a dose. And, there are also a lot of drugs that, for example, insulin, and we've seen a lot of action on combating insulin prices. But I want to know, what do you personally support on this issue? And what do you think Congress should be doing to combat this issue?
Well, one of the again, what I think is an easy policy change is to allow the federal government, in the form of Medicare, to negotiate in the industry for bringing costs of drugs down fast. So that's one thing. But the overall healthcare issue is to fix the healthcare system in the country. By fixing the healthcare system in the country, what I mean by that is working toward universal healthcare, which the practical way to go, in my opinion, is to take what we have, which is the Affordable Care Act, and fix it. Not to go to court like the Republican leaders supported by Matt Gaetz are doing, to say, hey, let's repeal it, and not even have a plan there to replace it, but no, to make sure that there are laws and regulations that make it so you as a worker working for a company are not afraid to change jobs because you'll lose your health care. You're going to have a public option. In my view, we should have a public option so you can buy into that instead of buying into something you have to buy into anyway with your employer's insurance or your labor union's insurance company or insurance provision. You ought to have the ability to go on your own to a public option and buy that, and keeping choice and not robbing people of healthcare that they already have that a lot of people do like is the way I think we need to move forward toward universal healthcare.
Awesome. And then I'm actually going to bring Jackson back for this next question.
Hello, Mr. Ayer. It's good to be back with you. So my question for you is, today, more than 2 million Americans are sitting behind bars in our nation's correctional facilities, the overwhelmingly disproportionate number of whom are people of color and those with mental illness. So my question is, what do you in Congress plan to do to bring more attention to these critical issues and actually solve them?
Well, that's a huge question. It's multifaceted in its way forward. And part of the way forward is to make sure there is good public schools and education so people don't get started in this school to prison pipeline. That means reading skills. We need to improve reading skills at the 3rd grade level, the 5th grade level, and other benchmarks that the statistics show. If you don't meet those benchmarks, you're much more likely to enter into the criminal justice system. Here in Florida, we have a problem about way too many juvenile deferrals into adult courts, the adult criminal system, and that's wrong. We've got still an attitude out in Florida among many sheriffs who say, it's better that we put them in jail than we put social services in to solve some underlying problems, because that's the quick fix, and people don't have an appreciation. By people, I mean a lot of leaders who are elected or appointed in law enforcement and in law enforcement oversight, county commissions, some mayors, they don't have as much of an appreciation of social services as they should have. And so we've got to reduce that. Recognize that there is racial bias in policing. There's racial bias from people going from their home to work and back. If you're African American in this country, you're much more likely to get stopped, and that got to change. And we have to change it here in Northwest Florida.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Jackson. Next question that I want to move on to, kind of in the same vein, is that, mental health and, the addiction crisis in America is also outside the criminal justice system. Yeah. And especially when it comes to mental health, we're seeing the National Institute for Mental Illness has documented in some places a 60% increase, whether it's anxiety or other common disorders related to the COVID-19 isolation that we're all going through right now. So kind of in a broad sense, especially through the education system, how do you think we can combat the mental health and addiction crisis here in America?
Recognizing it as a disease and not a character flaw. That's a basic start. And by again, a lot of it goes back to the schools where we're going to have, where we should be having adults, and probably in the form of guidance counselors, and looking after and helping young people with good habits and good mental health habits that would serve them well in their lives. We have, so one of the bases we have here is called Hurlburt Field. It's the home of the United States Air Force Special Operations Command. It has one of the, if not the, probably the highest operational tempo, that's what we call it, operational tempo in the United States Air Force. What that means is they deploy to these overseas wars, and they come back with a huge incidence, or huge incidents of PTSD. And that post-traumatic stress is, squarely a mental health issue, and something these airmen will take with them for the rest of their lives, and they need to have the skills to combat it. Okay, so that's one slice of it. That's the military slice of it, and we've got to deal and provide for military or for mental health services in our district more than we have now. A lot of folks need to go outside the district to get that kind of care, and that's wrong. So as far as Northwest Florida is concerned, I want to make sure we recognize and beef up the mental health provision as part of medicine. I'd like to see mental health recognized more within the Affordable Care Act for something that is mainstream in healthcare. Mental health is mainstream in healthcare.
Great. And then the next one I talk about, so the two last questions kind of focusing back on your district and the race. And, this is a very divisive time in America, and Matt Gaetz has been known for spreading disinformation and worsening the political divisiveness crisis here in America. So, what can you and your campaign do to bring, Democrats and moderate Republicans together behind truth and decency and kind of that moving forward with honor that you've talked about to win this race in November?
So you really asked, how can we bring people together in common unity and common cause to move our country and our region forward together? And it's by focusing on basic values that we grew up with, that we should have grown up with, meaning respect for the truth, mutual respect for differing opinions, and good faith toward identifying what's real and what's not real. And one of the things that Matt Gaetz does is he has peddled lies in his rhetoric and in his words. One of them was exposed a couple of months ago by 60 Minutes, and Matt Gaetz was identified by 60 Minutes rightfully by saying that he had a $3.7 million grant to the lab in Wuhan where this virus escaped. Wrong. Lies on 2 counts. It wasn't a grant to the lab. It was to a U.S. nonprofit scientific organization. It had a global mission. And 2, that this virus escaped from the lab in Wuhan. Wrong. Known falsehood. Oh, that's called a lie. That's right. Okay. So, and guess what happened though? The president heard about that, and he summarily withdrew that grant, $3.7 million grant through the National Institutes of Health, to this nonprofit in New York City based. And what's the result of that? We as a country, and we as a world, but we as a country are less prepared to control the pandemic and to know what that virus is doing because of the misinformation deliberately given out by Matt Gaetz because he thought it would be, rousing his base to color China as the villain here. Yes, China has some things to answer for the early propagation of the virus. So does Donald Trump. Our leadership. Our leadership, supported by Matt Gaetz, mishandled and bungled a lot of this. And these 159,000 American lives that are no longer with us did not have to be. So I think the way to come together is to recognize some basic truths, that the virus is calling their bluff on a lot of make-believe, and we just need to recognize the reality of suffering, the reality of the scale of the deaths, and the reality of needing to take public health measures such as masks, such as washing hands, and such as being careful about how many people come together and mix it up such that the virus can spread. We can't have that, and that's one way to rest on science, rest on public health, and rest on good judgment and mutual respect for differing opinions, and the good faith to go after what's true and what's not true.
Great. And then our last question, and you've already kind of touched on a lot, but why is it so important that we flip Florida's first congressional district in November?
It's important to get Matt Gaetz out because he is one of the main supporters of the kind of leadership that Donald Trump is representing. Donald Trump goes away, that kind of conspiracy, and resentment is going to remain. Changing and turfing out Gates is a step toward fixing that mentality, toward not fixing so much, fixing, but healing, allowing people who have voted for that kind of performance. I don't want to call it leadership. That kind of performance. They need an off ramp, and I'm offering that off ramp by saying just saying, resting on my record of service in the Navy, and I'm a safe pair of hands to represent us, because I know the job of representation. It's not the job of supporting ideology. And legal problems in the White House. It's the job of representing people here in this district. So it's important to change, to win this race and have the Democratic Party on top in this part of Florida, because we are going to be able to help deliver 29 electoral votes for Joe Biden to be president of the United States. We must have that change in the White House. The better we do here, the better Joe Biden is going to become the president. The better we do here up to the point of winning and sending Matt Gaetz into private life to think about what he's done or not done for our district is a part of the revival we need in Northwest Florida and in our country. Yeah.
Great. Well, so it brings us, it's the end of our program. And again, I just want to say thank you so much for being with us tonight and taking the time to let young people have their voice heard and ask questions. You can find Commander Air on Twitter and Facebook and at airforcongress.com. You can find Friends of Intelligent Democracy on Facebook and Twitter as well, and at our website, intelidem.org. And I want to say a big thank you to everyone who tuned in tonight or on the archive stream, and have a great night.
Thank you. Thank you so much.